Now this verse number 19, what it says is, aham ayam kutaha bhavati chinvataha. Aham, this I, ayam. Ayam means this I. Kutaha bhavati, where did it come from? Chinvataha, think clearly. Aipatatyaham, when we think clearly, this I, this ego, when we think, where did it come from? It falls. Nija vicharana, and this is due to inquiry. So what it says in this verse is that when we really dive deeper to find out who this ego, we will say this little I, who is this ego? Where did it come from? Why is it there? What is it? When we slowly keep questioning it, diving down into it, digging into it, when we keep doing that, then that very ego, it disappears. It disappears, it dissolves into its very source. We realize that this ego actually doesn't have any concrete existence. We realize that this ego is just, it's a notion. All it is a notion. But this takes place, or this happens when we inquire. If we don't inquire, nothing happens. If we don't think, nothing happens. And so Vedanta can only work when we think deeply, when we reflect deeply. If you'll notice that there were times in your life, and my life also, when we heard something. And when we heard something or when we saw something, it just passed. It didn't make a mark. It didn't make a spot. It didn't make an impression. But when it's something that we dwelt upon over and over and over again, and when it's something that we just kept on thinking about again and again and again, then it made an impression. Then we are like, yes, we got it. We understand what it is. So in Vedanta, that's really what's required. That's why there's so many texts. They're all saying the same thing, but they're coming from different angles because they want us to think deeply. Last time, if we thought about it, this time we have to go a little deeper and little deeper and little deeper until it makes a really deep mark where we can say, I get it now. I get it that this little ego, who I imagine myself to be, is actually an illusion. And why is it an illusion? It's an illusion because, number one, it's something that's temporary. It's completely temporary because when we go into deep sleep, this ego is gone. This notion of who I am is completely gone. But when I'm awake, it's there. So it's something that it appears at one time and then it goes at another time. So therefore, how can that be real? Why else is it an illusion? Because my ego, my identity, my personality keeps changing. 1 minute I am the seer, 1 minute I'm the hearer, 1 minute I'm the taster, I'm the speaker. It keeps changing again and again and again. It keeps changing. So then which one are we? Which of these notions are we? Which of these personalities are we? Because even that personality, which we thought is relatively consistent or constant, it also changes. Like, which Shubhani could I be? Right? That notion of Shubhani also changes. So that is something that we call an illusion, something that's changing, something that's temporary. And not only that, number three, this ego cannot exist on its own. It doesn't have its own existence. It's dependent on its existence on pure consciousness. In fact, when we dive in deeper, the ego in its essence is actually consciousness. Just like that wave cannot exist without water. If you really want to know what's the wave, it's really water. And without that water, the wave can't exist. So it doesn't have its own existence. It's not like it can just do things on its own. Then we also inquire that number four, this ego is so strange. It's so strange because it makes the subject and the object mixed. It mixes the subject and object. The subject is I, okay? And the object is bottle, right? What the ego does is it mixes the subject and the object and says, I am this bottle. It sounds so strange, right? So, for example, if we say the cat ate the rat. So the cat is the subject. The rat is the object. The cat ate the rat. So the subject and the object are clearly different from each other. Will we ever say the cat is a rat? We won't say that, right? So we will say I and this bottle. Will we ever say I am the bottle? That mixing the subject and the object is the ego. So now you take the body, I, and the object is the body, and it mixes it up. It mixes the I subject, it mixes the body object, and it puts it together. I am the body. I am the body is a notion. And that is, how can you mix the subject and the object? Have you ever seen something like this? So therefore, that is an illusion. Then we even think deeper. That which is the self, that absolute reality, how can it ever mix with transactional reality? How can something that's absolutely real, which is the self, mix with anything, with the body, with the mind, with the intellect? How can that? There are two different degrees of reality, because this is just transactional reality. It's transactional reality because it's not available in all of our three states. So it is like the woman in waking, mixing with the man in dream. And so the woman who's in waking state is so lively, so bold, so beautiful. The man in dream state is so gorgeous and so lively and amazing. But they can't have a child. They can't mix because they're in two different states. So this self, which is absolute reality, how can it mix with the body, with the mind, with the intellect? It cannot. Therefore, this ego, this notion is an illusion. So we said it's temporary. We said it's changing. We said it's dependently existing. We said that it's something that mixes the subject and the object together. We said that it's something that is born by the mixing up of two degrees of reality, which is actually not possible. So it's just an imagined thing. So the more we dig into it, the more we question it, the more we go deeper, we say, how is this ego real? And then on top of that, in deep sleep, it's completely dissolved. And what is there in deep sleep is just the self. So therefore, yours and mine, our whole life goes by thinking that we are this ego, we are this notion. Every single decision we make, every single thing we want to do in our life is based on I am the ego. Jivam kalpayate purvam. It says in Mandukya Upanishad. This is the first thing. We think I am a jiva, and then we do everything. Now, when we think we are the jiva and we do everything, everything's a mess. Because we already started the first step in the wrong. It's a wrong move. We already made the wrong move. We think in life we made so many mistakes. We think in life we made such deep and grave mistakes. Well, the biggest mistake is to think that I'm the jiva. That's a big mistake. That's a huge mistake. And we keep making that mistake again and again and again. So Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi, he says, Nija Vicharana. He says, do your own inquiry. And he says, to the one who's chinvataha, to the one who really inquires, who really goes deep. and who does it again and again and again, for that person, the ego falls. For everybody else, it will appear as real. But for the person who really thinks again and again and spends time in it, that ego will fall. And when that ego falls, the most beautiful thing happens. What is that which happens? This is now in verse 61. I froze, right? Okay. I don't know why, but will you give me a moment and I will switch cameras? Okay, this camera is working, so I don't need to switch. Okay. All right. In case anything happens, I have something else ready. Right. Let's go to the next verse. Verse number 20. Ahamina Shabhaj ya Ahamina Shabhaj yahamaham taya Spurati rit swayam paramapurna sata. Ahamina Shabhaj yahamaham taya Spurati rit swayam paramapurna sata. When that destruction of the ego takes place, what happens? Ahami. Ahami means this ego. Ahami nasha bhaj. Bhaji means enjoyed. When this ego, ahami, when this ego, bhaji, enjoys destruction, enjoys nasha, then what happens? Aham taya. That real I, or what we call that big I, spurati, that big I shines. Shines where hrit, that self shines. Swayam, it is self shining. And what is this aham? What is this atma? What is the self that shines? Parama, it is supreme. Purna, it is full, it is infinite, and it is sat, it is existence. So when the ego is destroyed, the self, which is the supreme infinite existence, shines forth of its own as I. So what does this mean? When we inquire, that ego falls. What does the falling of the ego mean? So very beautifully in the commentary, Guruji says, the destruction of the ego does not mean the destruction of the body, mind, and intellect. Okay, so this is very important. The destruction of the ego doesn't mean the destruction of the body, mind, and intellect, but the destruction of the false notion that I am the body, mind, and intellect. The ego alone is the cause of all our misery, and hence its destruction is desirable. Just like an actor does not fear changing from his stage costume to his normal dress, he does not mind giving up his role to be himself. Some people are so afraid that if this ego goes, what will happen? Will there be nothing? Will it be the end of me? Will everything go away? When the ego is destroyed, which is the notion, remember, the ego is a notion. The ego is a thought, okay? It's this thing which is not concrete. It's a notion. When it is destroyed, something shines forth. What is it that shines? Aham taya. Aham means that big I. Why is it repeated twice? Because that continuous awareness shines forth. Continuous awareness. That big I is that continuous awareness in and through each of the states we go through. It's that changeless presence that's there. Aham, aham, taya. And spurati, rit swayam. It shines. What do you mean by it shines? It shines means now it is ever available. It is there. When the ego is, or when the ego is seen to be true, it as though veils the self. Our attention is not on the self. This awareness of the self is as though veiled, as though covered. It cannot be covered, but it's as though covered. It's as though veiled. But when that ego falls, then what happens is that awareness of the self, it's ever there. All the attention to it is there. The presence is there. There's nothing blocking it anymore. There's no notion blocking it. The self is wanting to come forth, wanting to shine forth, meaning it's there and it's wanting to pervade every single part of our life. But with our own ego, we're blocking it. So spurati rit swayam, it's there, but now it's there without any obstacles. And what is this self? It is parama. It is supreme. It's supreme because it's changeless. It's supreme because it's an awareness. It's supreme because it is that very goal of life. It is parama. That ego is something that's changing, it ceases, it's nikrishta, it's low. The supreme self is parama. And the supreme self is purna. It's infinite. It does not feel limited by the body, mind, and intellect. That small I or that ego feels so limited by the body, mind, and intellect. It feels that it is this shape and in this size and this color and this face and this character and this mind. It feels like that. So therefore the ego feels that limitation. It feels bound. But that self is purna. It doesn't feel bound by any of these because it knows that these are just appearances in it. So therefore it's infinite. And of course, that self is Sat, its existence. Parama Purna Sat. This is what happens when that illusory ego is destroyed. Now the question might come that, okay, yes, that illusory ego is destroyed, but does it come back again? This illusory notion is destroyed. Does it come back again? For one who is chinvataha, remember the last verse, for the one who is truly inquired into the self, for one who is truly very deeply inquired, made that deep impression, for that person, then that ego does not come back the same way. And this is manonasha. That ego does not come back the same way, it comes back falsified. So the realized person understands that although there is a semblance, an appearance of this ego, that it is something completely false. It is not who we are. And therefore, the wise person is ever free because they don't give importance to it. It's a false thing. Why am I going to bother about it? But to the ignorant person, it is very real. And therefore, one wants to always make sure the ego looks good. How much effort people try to make themselves look good now, only in the apps. So many things they'll put so that they look very nice and very good. How much effort people make to look good in their resume, for their interview. How much of an effort we take to look good. But a wise person, doesn't take any effort because they know it's not them. I will tell you a little bit of an anecdote, and so you can understand how a wise person then will deal with their ego. Gurudev has he had a very powerful quote when I was reading the Gita about how we should remain as a lighthouse in this ocean. And when I really thought about that quote, so many things came to my mind. And this whole concept of what the ego is really fits with Gurudev's example. So picture this. Picture that there is this vast ocean. Okay, just picture in your mind. There is this vast, vast, huge ocean. And in there is a swimmer. And at first, the swimmer doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to move in this ocean, doesn't know what it's doing. It's almost drowning because it just doesn't know. And all of a sudden, it wakes up from that inertia, and the swimmer learns to doggy paddle. And it's trying to doggy paddle, but it's just catching its breath, all the time. It's just short of breath, trying to catch its breath, short of breath, trying to catch its breath, because it's very hard. So there's a lot of sweating, there's a lot of toiling, there's a lot of all of that. Then this swimmer meets a guru in this ocean. And this guru says, let me show you a few strokes so that you can swim peacefully in the ocean. You can try a few freestyle strokes. You can try a few backstrokes and breaststrokes, and try a few strokes, and you'll be able to swim well. And so the swimmer swims and learns the strokes and feels kind of a peace in life. But then something comes to the swimmer's mind, and the swimmer asks, is there an end to this ocean? Am I going to have to keep swimming? Am I going to have to keep swimming all the time? So she asks the guru, am I going to have to do this all the time? And the guru says, I think it's time for you to go to the lighthouse. And so the guru shows the way, and the swimmer swims to the lighthouse. And when the swimmer gets there, she realizes that she's so much at peace, because in the lighthouse, she's just that awareness, watching all the waves rise up and down, just watching all the waves rise up and down. And the swimmer is in so much peace, just being there, just watching the waves. And then it's as though the swimmer wanted to stay there the whole time. And the lighthouse said, no, you can't. You can't stay. You have to go back. You have to go back to that ocean. And so the swimmer goes back to the ocean. But it's a whole different ocean now, because the swimmer knows that her real self, his real self, is actually that awareness, that presence was there in the lighthouse. That's the real self. And the one going back into the ocean is just a swimmer who has to play its role. It just has to play a role. And as the swimmer plays its role, the swimmer doesn't any longer want to go up or down. She has no direction to go. No up or down, no here and there, no plans, nothing, no agenda. Because now this ocean is not a worldly ocean. It's a godly ocean. And the swimmer just lets the ocean carry her, because she knows it's really God carrying her, or he knows it's really God carrying him. This is what happens. So it's not that we completely detach from the world and forget everybody and forget everything. Go back. But it's a very different thing, because we know that the one who's swimming in this world, the one who's acting in this world, the one who's doing all of these things, is a completely false identity. It's just a role. And who sets the role? Not us. We're functioning by the divine will. So you will find with the realized masters, they don't have a will of their own. They don't have any wanting to strive, wanting to toil, wanting to sweat. They just are. And wherever the waves carry them, they go. That is the story of all the jivas. In the beginning, there's this drowning. There's this sense of I don't know what to do, tamas. Then there's this sense of doggy paddling, trying to make it and run here, run there, rajas. That's where we probably all are. Then when we meet Guru, the Guru teaches us some ways to be sattvic. But at some point in time, we realize even that's not enough. How long are we going to go through this? We want something deeper. So the Guru gives us the truth. And that's the lighthouse. And once we know the truth, then we just live it. That is called Spurati Hritsvaya Parama Purna Sat.